Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Max and Trev with BuzzTox here with our analysis video. In this video, we go through the newest Westworld episode and we give our thoughts and feelings and predictions on every single scene. What's going on, Trev?
Not too much, man. Excited to talk about this crazy episode.
This episode made me feel many emotions. Let's get right into it. So, we start off with Bernard, and he has a dream with him and his son. And he's reading to his son. He says, the Hatter says, he's reading Alice in Wonderland. And he says, the Hatter says if he had a world of his own, everything would be nonsense. And nothing would be what it is because everything would be what it isn't. And, this is kind of hinting at the audience, it really hints at Bernard and what he is, everything is what it isn't. And to me, it was almost like the creators of the show giving a nod to the audience, saying like, you guys think you know, but really you have no idea because everything is what it isn't. So expect the unexpected.
Yeah. Well, this was definitely unexpected. We both had the inklings that he could be one.
It was unexpected, except we were talking about it since episode 1.
No, I know. I just, after everything that's happened up until this point, it just didn't seem to me that they were going to pull out this showstopper this early into the show.
I think it was because, exactly. We believed that this reveal would happen maybe in a later season.
And also the reveal that he's, a Ford slave in a way. It's not like he's an Arnold model that's trying to break free, or at least not yet, but you know what I mean? I thought he would be, oh my god, I am one, but I'm
he is his own person.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he is still can be put in analysis mode and is still a slave to Ford, which I didn't think that was possible. I thought that he was a host, but I didn't think that he would be like a host, to that extent.
Exactly. Which is the saddest part about the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think that Alice in Wonderland really says, everything is what it isn't. Like Dolores started off as a damsel, and we're finding out that she's far from it. Mm-hmm. Bernard started as a human, to find out that he's not really a human, he's a host.
Well, how cruel is it, whoever programmed the dream of his dead and dying son?
Yeah, and, it just foreshadows that too. Only hosts have nightmares. Mm-hmm. And this is the first time we see Bernard wake up from a nightmare, and we've only ever seen Host wake up. We see Maeve wake up, we see Dolores wake up, and now we see Bernard wake up.
Yeah, but it goes deep with him, though, man. Even still, because he talks with I'm assuming, fictional wife?
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's really cruel to set him up to think that he is one, and then, I guess Ford is just going to nuke his memory again and start him fresh? That's sad, man. That's really sad.
No, I don't think he'll ever wipe him. I think he has I feel like he has a strong relationship with Bernard, even though he is a host.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the show carries it forward. But, anyways, after this nightmare, Bernard wakes up and he is speaking with Hector, and he's doing the typical analysis, asking him if he questions the nature of his reality, like he did with Dolores in episode 1. Mm-hmm. And Hector ends up saying no, and Bernard, just to be safe, shows him some images of their world, which to see it is very futuristic. We even see that bullet train.
Yeah.
Bet you any money it's using magnetic technologies to reduce the friction on the rails.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's a hyperloop, probably.
Yeah, man. And then on top of that, a guy from management goes and talks to Bernard and says that upper management needs Hector. And Bernard asked him if he has seen Elsie, and he says that she started her leave today.
Yeah.
So that begs the question, what do you think actually happened to Elsie?
Well, like you said, my theory about Ashley grabbing her as a big brother went out the window. Well, yeah, it went out the window. There's no saving it. But I don't think she's dead. So I think they would have showed that. I'm feeling like there is a ultimatum interrogation scene coming up with her.
Yeah, most definitely. I totally agree.
Like, someone's going to be sitting her down saying, yeah, this is happening. You found it out. Now, what side are you on? And, she's going to have some hard decisions to make.
Yeah. If she was going to die, they would have killed her on that, at that time for emotional impact. It's just curious because she is on Bernard's side, and we know that Bernard is most definitely on Ford's side. And she has discovered, the computer system in Arnold, so that she was almost coming closer to more of the board.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the person that grabbed her was an unmonitored host that was one of Ford's creations.
I'm all over the place with what's going on with the board, to be honest with you. We'll get more into it as we go on, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sold on what's going on with the board.
But I'm confident Elsie's alive. It just depends on who she ends up with. If she finds herself in a meeting with the board or with Ford himself. I'm leaning more towards Ford.
Yeah, I'm thinking so too. I don't think it was Ford that grabbed her. Do you think it was Ford that grabbed her? Just
No.
like a host that is employed by Ford.
Yeah. And then we go into Westworld, and William is actually playing cards with Lawrence. And I just want to say, this really foreshadows the friendship that the Men in Black has been talking about with Lawrence. How, like, Lawrence is the only guy that the Man in Black truly liked because he told him how it really is. He gave it to him straight. And he always talks about their friendship as if it was such a big thing. And I think the cards here kind of foreshadows that.
Well, yeah, he even says to both of them, like, I would fuck you guys over just the same.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it is really interesting because tell me if I'm just kind of shooting here, but like the way William is sitting in that chair reminds me of the Man in Black.
Yeah. Again, we're beating a dead horse on this. It's to us, to me and you, it seems so obvious, but there's still people that need convincing of it.
No, some people think it's Logan. Some people think he's a host. Like, it's fucking crazy.
I know. It will be really hard for them to make it clear if it's not him. Do you get what I mean? Like, there's so much evidence, at least in my eyes, and I'm pretty sure in your eyes, that it's him. So it just would seem so ridiculous if it's not him now.
Yeah, I know.
And I don't feel like it's something we've built up in our mind. It's just like we tried to be objective about it, and we saw things that kind of threw us off the trail, but then there was more evidence supporting that it is.
Yeah, but through all of our analysis videos, we've been able to look at this information and look at all of the evidence that are supposedly against Man in Black being William, and we could actually look at that and explain and justify why it's actually true.
Yeah, it's almost like we got to go in and highlight it, though, just to show it, because maybe people don't see it from the perspective we're seeing it.
Yeah, exactly. But, they continue to play cards in the train, and Dolores is clearly holding a grudge on Lawrence, and he does say, if I could, I would fuck you guys over again. And they end up talking about Logan, and William says that he really wanted to see what was at the end of the park.
Yeah.
And Lawrence said, and yet here you are, and not Logan, and it's just you. And Lawrence goes on to say that he thinks he might have more appetite for this park than he thinks.
Yeah.
And I think this is really leading into William's arc. I think we're going to see him, well, we do throughout this episode, he becomes more enthralled with the park and more interested in the park.
Yeah, but do you think he's there by happenstance? Or do you think he's there because he made a out-of-character decision for himself? Because we have Dolores Breaking Bad the whole time, right?
I think it was known that he was almost the perfect candidate that Dolores could use to get her to her destination, which was the maze. So I think he's having this life-changing experience, but really he's being used.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So, but someone must try and bury that code after they get to where they're going, because if we're going with he as the Man in Black in the future, then why is the Man in Black playing a black hat as opposed to a white hat?
I think he just gets more and more bitter. I think we're going to see his character arc shift.
Yeah.
He's clearly deeply in love with Dolores right now, and we're going to see that arc as he gets to the maze, and I don't know. I think it'll become interesting.
Another interesting thing we've never seen yet is a game over. Like a game over situation. Because remember that girl that we saw that was with Teddy when we thought Teddy got massacred again by those cultist things?
Yeah.
She was out there in the middle of the desert, and she just gets, like, she's stuck out there. So you would think, like, what would happen? Does she just have to walk it home? And then, like, eventually William's story is going to end with, I think, tragically, that's what's going to set him up for this whole Men in Black storyline. But what happens when you don't make it? You know what I mean?
I think they'll just come in and grab you.
Not like a respawn, like they drive you back to square one?
No, like I think if you're done, then they will come and take you. Like if you have paid for 3 days and 3 days are over, they'll come and collect you. And we've seen this done with We've seen this done with the people who shot up the town with Hector. They jammed the weapons, they captured them, they like knocked them out and then threw them in a prison to be let out the next day.
Oh, like a way of, so like a posse comes and takes them out?
Yeah. So they have different situations for everything, but they work it in throughout the host to make it seem organic.
See, I'm very curious to what's going to happen with William then.
Yeah, because then they reach a very dangerous section of the park, and this is the Ghost Nation territory. And, you know, we see all these heads on spikes. And these are all the people who have entered the territory without permission. And what their plan is they plan to go through this territory, and then after they get through this territory, they want to go through on foot.
Yeah.
So we leave off with them there. And then we go back to Bernard, and Bernard is trying to get a hold of Elsie. And then he tries to locate her, but she isn't even showing up on the map. And then Bernard decides to go talk to Teresa, and she's talking to somebody. And I think pretty much this scene is just showing that they still have kind of a love for each other.
Yeah.
Regardless of what has already happened. Like, they're talking about work, and then Bernard asks her how she is doing. So I think it's really trying to drive home that relationship because of the big reveal at the end of the...
Yeah. And I think that's going to be the hardest thing for him to get over, because there was a true connection there, and it's going to break his code.
Yeah, and Teresa, you know, she left him for work, but she obviously still has feelings for Bernard. So
yeah,
I think this scene was really to punch that home, to kind of feed into this big reveal at the end of the episode. So then Teresa goes on to visit Charlotte. I hate Charlotte. And Charlotte is just going to town on Hector. And then she lets Teresa in, they sit down and chat, and Teresa and Charlotte thinks that Teresa is doing a great job. But she's upset because of a couple things. First of all, the woodcutter mess. The guy smashed his head in with a rock, and that was the guy who's smuggling out information for Delos, or for this guy at the head of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And also because of Ford, because Ford is using half of the park's resources to create this whole new storyline that they're not interested in whatsoever. And in doing that, he's kind of ruining the park and all the hosts and all the storylines and all that stuff. And then Charlotte goes in to say a lot of interesting things about the board and the upper management, if you will. And she pretty much says that the people who work here are really nothing. It's all about the intellectual property. They care about the code, and they don't care about the hosts at all. And then she insists that Delos only cares about the research and the information. And to me, I feel like this Delos character is the guy at the top. He's the guy with the most shares in the company. He's the guy who pretty much owns the company. The guy who bought out Ford. Or not bought out, but you know what I mean.
So yeah, no, I think Delos is the name of the company, but you're saying like there is like a shadowy top dog from the corporation that's wanting information above Ford's head.
Oh, so Delos is the company.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Delos is a corporation that does. That's it. Actually, in the movie as well as like the sequel.
Oh Jesus.
Yeah. So no, it still makes sense though in your line of thinking. So you think that there's this shadowy board or a couple few individuals that.
Whoever's at the top has a different aspiration, because they don't care about the park, they don't care about the host, they care about the science and the code. And you know, I think we've gotten a tease with this. Like, we have all of this medicine that can cure everybody, but yet we don't know how to resurrect people, and we don't know how to keep people immortal. So I think this is something that they could be exploring. Yeah, exactly. But I think this is something that they are exploring, or transferring the consciousness of a human being into a artificial body.
Yeah.
And I think it's these things that they're interested in, and that's why they want the science behind it. And then she says something really interesting. She says that the gods need a blood sacrifice, and that she plans to have Ford retire by showing how dangerous these hosts are. And she says that they need to do something really unexpected. So, to me, blood sacrifice sounds the way it is. It's almost like a death sacrifice of something.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say blood sacrifice, to me it sounds more human than a host, because I know that hosts bleed, but there's something about that's really grounded in like a human sacrifice. I don't know if I'm off there.
No, like I think that what's the lady's name? The corporate lady?
Charlotte.
So Charlotte just said it as a metaphor, like she needs to throw someone under the bus, and something under the bus, but obviously it was heard.
I think we're supposed to think that the blood sacrifice represents Charlotte killing that individual, but I think there is a deep conspiracy, and I will get into that later when we talk about Ford.
Okay.
So we go back to Maeve, and Maeve walks into work, and she's done. She shuts off the piano. She talks to Clementine, and
she seems absolutely to detest this world now. Like, you see her look back at the guys shooting at each other. She just can't even stand this place anymore.
Yeah, and she realizes that she said this all before. As she's talking to Clementine, she's like, oh. So then you can see her kind of think and try and go off script. And she asks her what her nightmares are about, almost to get more information about it. And she also asks her if she dreams that she is someone else, almost hinting that Maeve is trying to explore if she's sharing the same experience, because she dreams that she's a mother of a child.
Mm-hmm.
And she's kind of wondering if Clementine also experiences that. But then we get, Clementine's origin. She needs to pay for her family because they have bad soil and they run a farm. And she obviously aspires to greater things, and she wants to get her family out of the desert. And, this is just further character development for the same reason. They're trying to really build her up, because when they pack that punch of her being decommissioned, they're trying to make it really mean something.
Yeah, and Maeve just feels bad for her because she doesn't know that it's all fake. Like, she just feels awful. Like, I can't explain to you why that doesn't make sense at all, because you haven't seen what I've seen.
Yeah, and then, as she's thinking that, I'm sure everything pauses, and everyone freezes except for Maeve. So Maeve has totally beaten this code.
She's got the Game Shark.
She's totally free. Like, she's almost human. She's perfectly human, I guess, in my eyes, except she's almost a little bit more enhanced.
Well, she's like human with pauses. Like, they could still control her. She probably couldn't leave the perimeter of the park yet. And she's got tracking in her, right? And they could probably shut her down remotely if they used hard coding techniques.
Yeah,
but when it comes to just, like, regular commands, no, she's immune.
Yeah, exactly. So they're coming forward, and Maeve is actually nervous that they're going to take her, so she kind of grabs a knife, which I think is definitely foreshadowing something. I think Maeve is going to be the one to kill somebody in the park.
It would be scary, because it's on her way out. It's got to be, because it will really put her in a bad situation.
I think most definitely. I think they're going to be on her, and I think she's going to have to kill somebody and hide them, or something along those lines.
Or she kills them, gets decommissioned, and put down in the basement, where she can start helping those guys get liberated.
Yeah, most definitely.
And then we get Abernathy back.
I want Abernathy back.
I know. That should be
that
should be a hashtag.
I know.
Bring back Abernathy.
It's funny how he's only in one episode, but we love him so much.
Oh man, he was amazing.
He's just such a lovable guy,
Yeah.
But then we go back to the train, and William asks Dolores what makes her so sure that this dream location of, like, what she's dreaming of actually exists. And, she goes on to say that she's not sure, and she feels like she was so sure of the world, and now she thinks what she believed is all a lie, and she really doesn't want to go back to her past life. And I think this was always in her code. So, she always aspired to leave. She always told Teddy about it. And Arnold wants her to always want to leave, to pursue this maze he wants. That's why Ford keeps her on such a strict loop in the safest part of the park.
Yeah. With, like, literally a white knight at her side at all times, where he can.
Yeah, and, Dolores always asks these, like, really deep philosophical questions. And I think, Arnold programmed her to do that.
Yeah, always.
Because it allows her. Exactly. It always allows her to question her reality. That's why she always spouts off about these things.
Yeah, and she's able to hide it, though, too, when she wants to. Because you see her in the first episode trying to hide it.
Yeah.
right? Like when that little kid asked her, I feel like she was like, yeah, like she just said a script where she knew, like, yeah, no shit, I am one of them. I'm trying to break free from here.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I agree with you on that. I think that was when she was under control, maybe. I'm not sure. But then she turns the tables and she asks William what he's looking for. And then we get a little backstory on William. You know, he said when he was a kid, he really only had books. And the books were his meaning in life. And he says that Westworld is pretty much like he woke up in one of those stories. And I think this is extremely interesting because the Man in Black went on to tell Ford that, you know, our life, our real world lacks truth. It lacks meaning. He says that the real world has no purpose. That's why people come to Westworld.
The only thing I had when I was a kid were books. I used to live in them. I used to go to sleep dreaming I'd wake up inside one of them because they had meaning. This place, this is like I woke up inside one of those stories.
The world out there, the one you'll never see, is one of plenty. A fat, soft teat people cling to their entire life. Every need taken care of, except one. Purpose. Meaning.
And I think that really speaks to where William is now, is that the only meaning he could find in his real life were books. Because he was always the people pleaser. He always became the person that other people wanted him to be.
Yeah.
And he never was able to really truly be himself. And he was allowed to escape in these books that he used to read. But now that he has Westworld, he's almost fallen in love with it in a sense because he can be his true self. And I think that's how the Man in Black feels. And it mirrors perfectly. They literally both say the same thing. You know, the books had meaning. Yeah. And the Man in Black says that the real world has no meaning.
No, it's really cool. But he also mentions as the Man in Black, he's looking for something real, right? And Arnold was the one telling the real story where someone could possibly die. So he's just, I don't know, like we don't even know how old these guys are, right? They live in a world where they can cure all things. I'm sure they can slow the aging process, right? Who knows, right? It could be something that people long for, is something that's dangerous because they live in such a safe world, right?
Right. But Dolores goes on to tell William that she really doesn't want to be in a story. You know, she really wants to live in the moment. And, you know, William feels that she's kind of coming on to him, and she says that, you know, he's getting married after this when he leaves. And then she gets upset and she takes off. But then William's like, no. And then he, like, follows her, goes into the cart, and he gives her a nice little speech saying that he's been pretending his whole life. And Westworld is now a place where he doesn't have to pretend who he is or hide who he is. And then they have some fun. And, you know, I think this is really him accepting Westworld over his life at home, you know. He forgot about his wife and just pursued Dolores. And I feel like we're really seeing William fall victim to this world now.
Big time. But see, he doesn't... It's hard for me because he doesn't even know that she's Breaking Bad. You know what I mean? Like, she's saying all these things, but he has to think in the back of his mind that, oh, like, this was sort of tailor-made for me. Just like anything else in this world.
Yeah, but I feel like he can't because he feels like it's so real.
Well, he's definitely conflicted. And he, obviously, the scales were tipped over at this point where he just threw himself into a passionate moment, but I don't know. Like he even says that he's gotta go. So that's what gives credence of him being the Man in Black, is because he does whatever he has to do in life so that he can be there all the time. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So this moment is pivotal because it solidifies his true love, not for just Dolores, but for this place as a whole.
Yeah, and then, you know, people always ask, you know, if William is so in love with Dolores, why is he coming back as this Man in Black figure and being so nasty? And I think it's more to the fact that he wants a human interaction with the person he loves.
Yeah.
We stress this all the time. Human emotion is what kind of breaks the code and makes them more human.
Yeah.
And you can do that with suffering, you can do that with many other things, but obviously love is like the strongest thing. Like he built that with Dolores through like this huge adventure. And I think Man in Black is in the position where he can't do that. He can't every single time when he goes into the park go on an adventure with Dolores to try and get that love back.
No,
so
and
he kind of does that with suffering.
And he's been cock-blocked by Teddy.
Now Teddy is in place, and because I believe that he is now the reincarnation of William.
Yeah.
And he can't just take Dolores anymore and go on this love adventure to try and build that relationship. Because now Teddy is there, his past self. So he has to kill his past self in order to have that relationship with the woman he loves now.
Mm-hmm. And she only becomes real when he just escalates it so far that she breaks code and maybe comes back and realizes what's going on. And then all is good is what we're hoping. Yeah,
exactly. But let's go outside of the park. We see Ford and Bernard now meet with Miss Bitch and Teresa about the park. And Charlotte goes on to say that they discovered an issue and, they pretty much want to make it look like hosts hold a grudge. And that's what happened earlier with the milk guy. They're kind of capitalizing on that opportunity. And Teresa also points out that the tech guy who is doing this experiment with Clementine is also a host, but he's been coded to be read as a human because of the simulation.
Yeah.
So Clementine, in her eyes, thinks that this guy is human, even though that he is a host. But I think this is interesting because it does foreshadow that hosts have other uses outside of the park.
100%. We've seen it even with the hostess, right?
Yeah, we've seen it with the hostess, and this is further foreshadowing Bernard. So it'd be interesting to see the real world and see how they use these hosts, because I feel like you wouldn't see these photorealistic hosts outside of Westworld or any other world, artificial world for that matter.
Well, do you think that's sort of part of the story already? Because it got me thinking about why now Ford would want to keep everything in the park. Because if the tech got out and the programming got out, anybody could be anybody, and these things could be used for nefarious means.
Yeah, and he couldn't be in control of his own creation. And Ford is a guy who always wants control.
Well, as we see, yeah.
And I think that's one of his primary motives, is he wants to be God of this world that he created. He doesn't think that him sacrificing control is almost the end to him. Because imagine creating something, it's like your baby, and you're not able to control it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's really seeking out that control. That's why Bernard is a host. That's why, he has these hidden motives, hidden rooms where he's building these hosts that don't obey the board.
Yeah. But again, he's the one piece that I can't. He's like a bar of soap. He just keeps slipping through my mind's fingers because I really don't. I can't get a grip on his motive at all, because it's like, oh, then is he like some twisted good guy where he sacrifices someone like Teresa in order for the good of humanity? Because if these things really did get out, then it would be the end of real humanity. He's tough. We need more pieces in the puzzle to figure him out, or at least for me.
Yeah, but then what this guy does is he actually beats the crap out of Clementine, and then they redo the test, and then we see her kind of understand it. She gets sad, and then she ends up beating him up, and then they go psycho with it. They make her like taste her own blood,
yeah,
and like touch her lips, like what she did in like the first episode. And then Ashley tells her to freeze, but she doesn't freeze. She doesn't obey the motor functions, and then Ashley just ends up shooting her.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just like, it's clear that they faked it.
Oh, big time. But Ashley's hard off to shoot any of those robots. Like, since the get-go, he's like, yeah, shit's gonna get bad. Like, he's just waiting to shoot.
Yeah, but she was approaching him, and they're pretty strong.
I know. It was all planned, though, as we know.
Yeah, but what's interesting here is that we actually haven't seen in the show hosts kill guests out of a grudge, obviously, because we haven't seen any guests get killed.
Well, until later in the episode.
Yeah. But what we have seen is a host kill a host because of a grudge, and, they really did capitalize on that opportunity. But I think, like we said earlier, I think Maeve is going to be the first host to kill a guest in the park.
Yeah, I'm just trying to paint this scenario of why that would be. You know what I mean? What would she get out of killing a guest? Unless she wants to get out and be decommissioned.
I think it'll be a moment of desperation. Like, she has to.
Yeah.
Because she's in a certain predicament. But because of that show that Charlotte and Teresa did, Charlotte actually fires Bernard, and Ford just looks like annoyed, and he's smiling because he like clearly knows what's happening.
Yeah. And he doesn't say anything to Bernard when he's set free. Like, total cold shoulder. Like, that's why in the episode before we knew what happens later on, it was just like, that was weird. But it was almost like he was a master chess player, because if he did say anything, he would admit guilt. And that was what they were trying to get out of Bernard, for him to like point the finger at Ford for saying he was the one that fucked it up, not me.
Yeah. And with Ford, he's smiling in a certain way, like he does at the end of the episode, where he's almost saying, like, seriously, you don't know what's going on here? Like, I can't believe you don't know. Because I feel like he was aware that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And he's always one step ahead. And we'll get more into that at the end of the episode.
I would say like 5 steps ahead.
Yeah. But then we go back to the park, and William is really into this game.
Big time.
They wake up, and William goes on to tell Dolores that the park, he misunderstood the park. And he says that, you know, the park doesn't show your worst self. It only shows your deepest self. It shows who you really are. And I found this interesting because if you look at William's actions, I don't think it accurately reflects who he really is. Like, he left Logan behind, which is kind of a dick move.
It almost was like, yeah, it was a dick move, but he had it coming. And the way that Logan smiles at him, it was almost like a way of saying, like, you're a dick, but good on you because you finally grew a pair.
Yeah, because he was always looking to, you know, get revenge in a sense on Logan, or tell him how he really feels, and he actually got to in that sense.
Yeah, but Logan didn't seem hard done by. Yeah, he said, help me, but then he smiles as he pretty much gets a no from him.
Yeah, but I found it interesting because, you know, William kind of just realized this after, you know, being with Dolores. But Ford's thoughts on it were very interesting, where, you know, Ford kind of conflicted with what William said. He said that people already know who they are. They want to know who they could be.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, this does apply to William because he's always a people pleaser.
Yeah.
Like, he knows who he is as a person. He's very integral. But, you know, in Westworld, he can, you know, he doesn't have the weight of society on his shoulders. He can kind of explore and be himself. So. Yeah.
He has freedom in a place that is fictional than he does in real life. You know what I mean? Where he has to please everybody.
Yeah. And then he goes on to tell Dolores that he never felt feelings for another woman like this before. And, you know, he says that she unlocked something in him. But then she goes on to say, I'm not okay, William.
Yeah, which is very annoying.
Why is that annoying?
Because she totally is a key.
To what?
To this whole adventure that's unfolding. We know this almost so obviously from this scene forward, because she wakes up in a different mood. And she has drawn this mural that she's never drawn before. And it's because she's had an emotional experience on the side of love and not stress. And it's opened up her eyes to something that she must see to pursue what she's pursuing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, the emotion allowed her to kind of paint the canvas, and it allowed her to, you know, she tells William that she always painted the world around her, and this time she really wanted to paint something new.
Yeah.
And I think that's what William did. He allowed her to kind of open her mind.
And I don't think this is the only instance where she's a key. I think she's the key to the maze. Something about her is the key to unlocking the maze.
And the key to whatever Arnold's motives are.
But it's still hard to resolve for me, because it's like, if she is the key and the man in black is William and he's trying to free her, I feel like he would have brought her along on his adventure. But there's something more to the situation with the man in black at this point, reaching the maze on his own.
Yeah, and it's funny because, you know, he's using Teddy to get there and Wyatt. So the connections there are interesting, you know? Like, it seems like the area that Wyatt attacked, it seems like it could be a place where the maze was, or the maze currently is, you know, with the white church, because we haven't seen that location yet, only in flashbacks.
I think Wyatt is a final boss that Ford has put in front of the Men in Black. Not to test them, just to sort of hold them off. And it's something he hasn't done, and maybe he doesn't want him to get so close. I don't know. Do you think that Ford, this is important, do you think that Ford knows what the maze is and where it is and what it's about? Or do you think he's looking for it himself?
I think he has a concept, but I don't think he actually knows what it is. I'm honestly not sure.
Do you think it's 100% Arnold creation?
Yeah.
See, that's what I mean. So with him digging up this whole place and changing the whole story, I feel like he is... Well, we sort of see it in the episodes, the names of the episode. One of them is, I think the last one is called the bicameral mind, or bicameral mind, or however you pronounce it. The theory where there was someone whispering in your ear.
Yeah.
And that's how consciousness sprang about. And that's also that where they talk about in psychology where the God's voice comes from in our subconscious. It's like an inside mind that talks to us and reasons with us and tells us what to do. And that's important, obviously, because people are whispering to Dolores, right? So I feel like Ford is trying to create a religious story to prevent the hosts from Breaking Bad, and he can use this religious story arc to cover up anyone that might be Breaking Bad. So if they hear a voice, he sort of guides them to this church in this place of worship and say, oh, it's this, it's that, right? To try and like sort of air traffic control any robots that might be looking for the maze or breaking their code into a church scenario where it's sort of covered up and he can control it. Whereas the actual person that's talking to them from inside the code is Arnold, or a program that Arnold has set up to get them to break. So it's almost like this battle between good and evil, almost like the God and devil type situation you see in the Bible, where they're trying to corrupt souls and all these different exchanges between the two by influence. So I really think he's trying to cover up the maze, or what he understands about the maze with this story arc. And Wyatt is someone specifically that he created to prevent the Man in Black from getting closer to the maze.
But I think there's a certain amount that Ford does know, because there's a lot of this information within the hosts. Teddy even tells her in episode 3 that there is a place where the mountains meet the sea, and it is so pure it'll wash the past clean off of you, and you can start again.
We've traveled all over these parts. Isn't there anywhere we could go?
You know, there is a place I heard about down south, where the mountains meet the sea. They say the water's so pure there, it'll wash the past clean off you. And you can start again.
I find this interesting because I think that Teddy is the recreation of William. And I think Teddy's almost telling Dolores about the experiences that they had together. Because, you know, Teddy comes off of a train, which is like William, and he's a very mysterious guy, but yet he's lived all these adventures, and, you know, he heard of a place where the mountains meet the sea, and I think that originally was Dolores' creation. So it's funny because Teddy was actually telling Dolores about her own thoughts when they were speaking. Mm-hmm. So I think that, you know, leads credence to Teddy being the host version of William.
Yeah, but we're both in agreement that the story arc that we're seeing with Dolores and William is the malfunction in the park that happened 30 years ago from the past, right? Something's going to happen within their story that breaks the park, right? That they made mention of. Bernard said, we haven't had a breakdown in 30 years. Or we haven't had a major something in 30 years. Someone else had mentioned that earlier as well. So, to me, that whole story arc between those two is leading up to a moment where there's a major breakdown. There's something big that happens. So Ford could have got a clearer picture of what the maze is from back then, and then started seeking it out for what it truly is. We see him look through the notebook, and we are in agreement that it was Arnold's notebook. It has pictures of Dolores and it has pictures of the maze, which gives credence to the key theory of her being something major to do with the maze, not only to seek it out, but maybe to open it, maybe to activate it. We don't know.
Yeah, and based off what...
I just feel like he doesn't know the whole situation. It is mostly an Arnold creation. The last thing that he did to sort of lock down something that... The one thing Ford doesn't have control over. Entirely.
And I think, the maze does represent, a new beginning. As Teddy says, it'll wash the past clean off of you. So I think we can see that with, first of all, what the maze actually is. Maybe could be the transfer from one piece of consciousness to another, like what we were thinking. Or, even William. Clean the past clean off you. No longer you're William. You kind of convert your character into the Man in Black. It's like the transfer. So it's like the maze is like a jumping off point where you can leave your past behind and have this new life, which is kind of what Dolores wants to do.
Yeah. Like choose your fate.
Yeah. But then the train gets stopped by Confederagos and they shoot up the train with a machine gun and they end up sending out this dude with nitro, blow him up. They make the crazy escape. William ends up grabbing Dolores because she falls off her horse. And the natives come and light all the Confeds up. So that was a really cool scene. I loved the action. It was very awesome. And it's one of those shows that it doesn't need the action. Like, it's so weird. I'm just as entertained watching just the intrigue of the show.
No, it's a fucking sweet horse chase through a grove. And then the natives show up. It's just badass.
Yeah, and then when they finally escape, they make it to this location that Dolores drew. And, you said you think it's kind of like the maze gate?
No, I just think it's like along the path. You know what I mean? Like she's got to checkpoint 3 now. And this is a reassuring checkpoint to let them know that they're on the right path. That's why she had this moment. She had this emotional, true moment. And she's let loose from her mind or from her dream a checkpoint. And then that way they know they're on the right path. The more of these they get, the closer they are to finding whatever she's looking for in this timeline. Almost like a calling. It's calling to her.
Well, it is a calling to Dolores because she actually decides to stay. William decides to stay with her, of course. And then, Lawrence tells them that no one has actually made it back from there. So, you better start talking to the dust.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting is that there's a lot of stuff that we haven't seen. We've seen flashbacks of all these people dead. And we've seen flashbacks of Teddy and Wyatt killing all of these people next to a white church, and Dolores kind of seeing all these dead people. And we haven't seen this location, and I think this location is actually inside of this area. So I think there's a lot of possibilities. I think we could see Dolores kind of stumble across Teddy with William being there, because Teddy, I think, is following a different storyline at this moment.
Or Teddy shows up as the cavalry. So you meant like game over screen like I was talking about. Maybe they get so close to something that breaks that they need to be honed in, and they send a cavalry there to massacre the entire town and pull William out because he got too close to an edge. Or something unexpected happen when they meet Arnold, or when they get too close to the maze gate. Who knows? But I really think it's this huge massacre that was so crazy at the time when this 30-year-old happening occurred that they had to wipe out everybody. And this is so kind of PTSD in Dolores' head that she's starting to remember this massacre. And it was because she got so close either to the maze or to Arnold, or it was because she was with William at the time and she was experiencing love and stress and emotions. Something that's buried deep.
I think we could potentially see this with Teddy doing the massacre. And I think, Teddy was made out to be this like really good guy, and I think we've seen him become darker with the Man in Black, and I think that's because he's almost accessing his past self. We're seeing these hosts access their past memories and their past experiences, and I think we're slowly going to see Teddy do that. And I think his past life with shooting all those people, I think Ford implemented that in his new storyline and his origin story.
For sure.
Because Teddy thinks that he's the good guy in this story, and he thinks that Wyatt is kind of the devil and he killed all these people. But he's having these flashbacks of him killing people too.
Yeah.
So I think Ford took something that actually happened and made it a part of Teddy's current story. Made it a part of his origin story, because when he gave Teddy this story of being the unknown and not giving him a backstory was because he was trying to mimic William. William is a guy who came from a world that doesn't exist according to the people in Westworld, so he needs to be mysterious. So they kind of bring Teddy in there, but I think now Ford introduced that aspect of the story now into Teddy, and I think we're going to be seeing, the reason we're seeing Teddy become more dark is because he's accessing his past experience, his past self, which was a bit more dark and more jaded.
It could be that Ford sent a army after William and Dolores to sort of corral them in, and Wyatt and Teddy were the ones that were on that army to go kill everybody in the town that was in the area of wherever William and Dolores were. We saw it with the robbery massacre with Hector, right? In episode 2 or 3, where the story creators needed to create this diversion event to cover up the hosts that they needed to kill to undo their updates, right? So if something bad happens in the park, they're not afraid to send in a big ass massacre, right?
Right.
So maybe Wyatt was the guy that kills Dolores in the William timeline, which would make the Men in Black have a more emotional response to Wyatt once he comes up against them.
I don't think it would be Wyatt. I think something has to happen where Dolores can make a decision that would change Westworld and kind of destroy it maybe, and William is the one to stop it. I just think that this may be the arc of Teddy and Wyatt could be potentially be a part of it. I'm not sure. But anyways, we go outside of Westworld and we see Maeve pretty much talking to Felix and asking him about Clementine, and she really wants to know where she is. And he actually ends up taking her to Clementine, and we see her get decommissioned. This is one of those things I totally forgot Clementine got decommissioned. I actually really liked her.
Yep. She's a pretty cool character.
But what does decommissioning do? Because I always thought that like they shove that thing up their nose and kind of puncture something in the brain maybe.
Well, what's interesting about that, I noticed when Felix is explaining to her the difference between Maeve and a human, is like he says like you're actually more advanced than us, but there's something, and he points right to sort of the center of her head and says there's something right there that sort of controls you. So it could be that they go in there and they kind of bury it. They think that they're turning them off from the system and that they're running on bad code so that they're done. Like most robots don't respond after that. They only respond to very basic move over here commands, and that's it. And we see it sort of with Abernathy. He gets sort of corralled down to the sub B83 and let go. So maybe you're right. Maeve kills someone so that she gets put down there. She gets decommissioned to get put in this sub level 83 to then be with Clementine and Abernathy and all the decommissioned robots.
I just don't get it because Abernathy seemed like he was fine. He was actually even showing emotion when he went in.
I think we're supposed to see it like that because he sort of broke code. And we see it with Maeve. She broke code too. So the chains have sort of been lifted off his control beacon or whatever there's in their head. But he probably didn't get enough out of the experience that he had to be able to do anything outside of the commands that he was given. Whereas Maeve has been pumped up with her Game Shark stats to be able to withstand whatever a decommission is to these things, and to influence now and reprogram all those ones that are in the basement.
See, I still really don't understand what decommissioning is, because I feel like it doesn't do anything substantial. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see.
I think it would just wipe their memory completely. So it would wipe whatever memory that they had, whatever loop they had, and then whatever it would almost be like when you reset your phone before you sell it, putting it back to like factory settings, bringing them back to post milk mode. You know what I mean? Ready for programming as into a new loop. No memories of what they were before, and like I said, like resetting their default to factory settings straight from the manufacturer. Basic commands, basic obedience. That's it.
Okay. And then we end up going to Bernard, and he talks to Teresa, and he pretty much confronts her and says that he knows that the whole thing was staged. And he told her that he knows that the stray with the satellite transmission was also them. But he ends up changing the subject and says that, 40 years ago, Arnold was responsible for most of the code, and he says that there actually is a connection between memory and improvisation. So he's saying that something's wrong. And he ends up telling her that he has to show her something. So that teases something that's going to happen later in the episode. But then we go back to Sylvester and Maeve, and, Maeve really wants to escape, and she threatens to kill them if they don't help her get out. And Sylvester says something interesting, how everything in this building and everything in her is meant to keep her here.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she can't pass through the perimeter.
Yeah, and Sylvester says it's a suicide mission. So it'll be interesting to see how they actually do that, because I feel like they've gone this far. Why stop now, right?
I think there'll be an attempt, but it won't work out, and she'll have to, like I said, get decommissioned, because that's the one place that they don't really pay attention to.
Yeah, no, I guess that makes sense, yeah. And then we get a flash again back to Bernard and Teresa in the elevator. And they're just kind of talking about everything that's going on. And Teresa's trying to justify her actions by saying that she was tasked by safeguarding the intellectual property. And Teresa says that Delos owns the host minds and the storylines and decades of work. And she really wanted to back up this information, because Ford won't allow this information to be backed up on an external source. And they think that when he leaves, he'll kind of take the information with him and they won't have access to it. So that just really raises a question, what is Delos's motive? They only want this research and data. So what do you think they want to do with it?
Well, I started looking into the movie and then the subsequent sequel called Future World. And they were all about cloning, like elites. So people that would come there were like world leaders or financial people of the world. And Delos in this movie were trying to systematically replace these individuals for, like I said, the betterment of humanity. Because
what do you mean replace individuals?
So they would go, so the whole movie is they go to this place. And it even mentions Westworld, like, oh yeah, we really fucked up with Westworld. We now have invested $1.5 billion in safety improvements. They go there, they run into, it's more futuristic, like that you can go into space and all this shit. But same idea. You go there, you can live your fantasies, there's sex robots, there's the whole thing. But then they start realizing that people are getting kidnapped, and then their consciousnesses are being altered and then uploaded to robot clones of themselves, and Delos is behind the whole thing. And basically there's a confrontation at the end with the head of Delos, and he basically states, we're doing this to save humans because humans are going to destroy themselves.
Okay, so I guess that does align with my thoughts in a sense, because I think this data, and they want this research in order to preserve life in a sense. They can currently make life, and they can cure all disease, and they can have people live long and prosperous lives. but you can't live forever. They haven't gotten immortality, and they haven't learned how to resurrect the dead. And even in episode 1, Ford says to Bernard, you know, hey, maybe one day we can resurrect the dead. So I think that's really what they're trying to do, and that would entail transplanting an individual's consciousness into a host's body.
Yeah.
And I think to test that, you can't test that legally because that results in human experimentation.
And I think that's what happened with Arnold. He did it on his own.
Yes, so I think the way to test this is to do a blood sacrifice. So we'll get into that more, but I think the blood sacrifice is an undercover thing that Delos is doing illegally. And they're using Ford as kind of the assister, but we'll get more into that later.
Yeah. I should have said, like, I don't think Delos in the movie is trying to protect humans or trying to save the planet, in a sense, because they think that humans are not responsible enough to keep the planet safe. So they're replacing them to save the planet, not the humans.
Oh, okay. And then we get some foreshadowing. Bernard says, you know, the longer he works here, he better understands the hosts, and the humans are the ones that actually confuse him. So I think that's continued to foreshadow.
Oh, they're just landing on thick at this elevator trip.
I know. So they actually arrive at the house, and Bernard says that the hosts actually do the surveys of the land. That's why this actually isn't in the maps.
Yeah.
Because they're programmed not to see it. And then the moment happens.
Oh my god.
She points out the door, and he's like, what door?
Oh man. Total stomach drop. I was like, no, this isn't
Same.
happening.
I got so sad, man. I was just so upset.
No,
I was
this
like,
is so
oh,
upsetting.
poor guy.
And still, I there was no way of knowing what would happen.
Yeah, so then, you know, they go downstairs, and she asks him about the place. And he says that it's a remote diagnostics facility. And he says that Ford and his partner, which is Arnold, used to use it when the park was in beta. I feel like this is actually Bernard's technology talking in a sense, or Ford talking through Bernard, it seems like, because Bernard doesn't even know that this exists, but somehow he can explain to her what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because Ford is now using it as a hideout, pretty much, to build all these stray hosts that can't be controlled by the board. And he brought in this creation apparatus, which we don't see in the talks between Bernard and Dolores because they actually are sitting in the same room.
Yeah.
And now this kind of messes it up a bit. I want to get your point of view because now Bernard is talking to Dolores in this room. But the creation apparatus thing actually isn't there, but they're talking in that room. So that's obviously going to be set in the past. So, and Bernard is wearing different clothing, and these conversations that he has been having with Dolores is almost totally disconnected from the story.
What about this? If Bernard is Arnold, like we had some commenters mention, and I'm starting to believe so, then what if the conversations that we see them physically in the scene together is when Bernard was Arnold talking to Dolores?
I agree. So we're actually seeing Arnold communicate with Dolores.
Exactly.
And
talking about the maze
Bernard.
and reading her as like his daughter, like in a sense, like because it's his creation, Alice in Wonderland, where he dreams he's reading his son, his dreamed son, Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, no, it would be really interesting, and I think it's something that will definitely, I think, will happen. I think Bernard has to look exactly like Arnold because that would be an amazing reveal. Probably in the last episode of this season, we're actually going to see that picture, and that picture is going to have Bernard standing there.
Yeah.
And I think that's really going to kind of be mind-blowing. But what this means, though, is if that is truly Arnold talking to Dolores, it means that we're actually watching 3 timelines. Bring on the mindfuck.
I'm trying to resolve this.
So this is how it goes.
That's right. Yeah,
I'm gonna go through every conversation that he has ever talked to Dolores. So what we notice is all these conversations are disconnected. first time he talks to her is pretty much just about if she has been sharing their conversations with anybody. And if this was actually the present timeline, Bernard would have told Ford about these conversations with Dolores.
Yeah.
So this definitely isn't the present time. And in the second time, he gives her Alice in Wonderland to read. And I think Arnold has the exact same origin as Bernard. His son has died, and Ford created that in Bernard, obviously, to keep him loyal to him. But the third time is interesting because this kind of goes with the continuity of the story, where Ford talks to him and tells him not to, really care about the host because they aren't real, they're unconscious. So right after that, he goes to Dolores and tells her that he made a mistake, and he gives her a decision to choose if she wants to, keep being herself and pursue, consciousness in a sense, or he can delete her and delete her train of thought in a sense, and he lets her choose. But then the fourth time, he allows her to pursue the maze. So what I think is before he died, he had her pursue the maze on her own I don't even know. I don't know.
Well, then, I wonder if the maze then is a test for hosts to see if they're capable of sentient thought. And if they can follow all the pieces and they can break their code and break their loops, then they've done the Turing test, or whatever you want to call it. It's a way of them choosing their path. And the way that Teddy says it is that, it's a man in the middle that's died 1,000,000 times, and it's sort of like these beings have either been killed or reset millions or thousands of times, whatever you want to call it. And the fact that they're breaking their code isn't because of updates, it's because of consciousness being born within them, right? Like Maeve wasn't one that was updated, to my knowledge, right? She broke her code, and that's on the current timeline. Like, she's just coming to her own realization that things aren't what they seem in her world or in her reality. So she's breaking her code. And Dolores had this whole thing already happened to her way back in the past.
Yeah, and I think, 3 timelines does make sense because she's flashing back to a lot of different things that she's done. And, it can't be in the present because Bernard is a host and he would have told Ford, not by choice, that he's been talking to Dolores. If it was in the presence of William's timeline, I don't think they were talking remotely. I think they've established that they talk physically, and they're talking in that physical room. So it can't be that timeline either.
If they're talking in that physical room, maybe Ford didn't know about that area at that time. Is that possible?
It is very possible because it was a house that was built as a gift from Arnold to Ford.
Yeah, but when was that gift discovered?
I'm not sure.
You know what I mean? Like, if maybe Arnold, Arnold has been hiding out in this area ever since he uploaded himself. Because there's a weird question that he poses to Bernard in this scene, where he says, "Bernard, were you there back in that time?" "Oh no, you weren't." Like, almost like he's confusing his timelines himself, because Arnold is Bernard. If we're on that line of thought, then maybe Bernard didn't show up until a certain time later, right? And Bernard is talking to Dolores on the same timeline, but he's in this hidden area, hidden even from Ford.
Yeah, and maybe, Ford is confused about when Bernard was actually created, because Arnold created Bernard to replace him so he could pursue being the man in the maze. Or something of that sort, but I'm not sure.
Oh, it's very unclear. This was such a huge episode, and mulling over every single detail is just crazy. Like the fact that like I even thought he was trying to kill. I think I even said it in the reaction video that he was replacing his his younger self robot, because that thing has been breaking code. I don't believe that as much anymore, but who knows now with Ford. I'm more curious to see what we see in the next episode. If we see a cloned Teresa, that makes this whole thing a whole different story. Because I feel like then Ford is working and has totally bought and paid for the entire board. And they don't care about anything that he does. He is totally in control from top to bottom, this whole place. Because what could stop a man with this much power? The board isn't going to say shit if this guy can do whatever he wants and create pretty much an army of sentient superhumans to go after whoever he wants, replace consciousness of whoever he wants. It's pretty crazy.
And then we get the big reveal. Teresa's going through these blueprints, and she sees Robert's prototype, which is the child. We see Dolores' prototype. And then she asks Bernard what this is, and he looks at it, and it's actually his blueprint, and he says that it doesn't look like anything to him. What I find interesting is that the name of this is not shown at the bottom. So it's obviously hiding something. Possibly that it actually says Arnold at the bottom of that page. Which to me makes the most sense, because I feel like they hit it purposely.
For sure.
And then during this time, Ford comes in, and Teresa calls him a monster because she finds out that Bernard is now a host. And he asks, am I really? Because she would destroy all of them. So I think, Ford could look as the good guy here because, he does respect the host in a sense, but he made Teresa realize that, these hosts are more human than you can imagine. I think it's kind of a...
Yeah, well, he definitely pulled
No, I know.
And
it was a wake-up call for her because, she pretty much really kind of fell in love in a sense with this guy to find out that he's a host. It is definitely a huge wake-up call. And, Bernard ends up getting emotional about his wife and his son, and just great acting by Jeffrey Wright there. I actually I felt so bad for Bernard in this scene.
Yeah, because he starts breaking code too. He's like, I can't be one. I'm not one. I
Yeah.
can't be one.
And Ford talks about this theory that he ended up reading where human intellect was like a peacock's feathers. And it was really just to attract amaze, just awe from people. And it was pretty much, it's just an elaborate mating ritual. And all of this knowledge that we have is used to just achieve basic things. And yet the peacock is so beautiful, but yet it can barely fly and it eats bugs and lives in the dirt. So, I don't know. To me, it pretty much means that all this technology is being misused for superficial reasons.
Yeah, as per the crazy psychopath man.
Yeah, and he says that, the hosts are best under his control.
That's what I mean. And so that goes back to what I said. I think he's playing it close to his chest in a twisted good guy sort of way, because he knows what people would do if they had this technology at their disposal. Even though he seems like a crazy person.
Yeah, exactly.
Right now,
yeah, he's trying to protect everybody
guy.
Because this technology is really dangerous, and he knows that it is most safe under his control. And that's really what he's struggling with. And Teresa immediately questions that and says that, Bernard's the one who brought me here, so he obviously isn't under your control. But then, Ford goes on to say that he's done exactly as I say for many years, and I wanted you to come here. Which is kind of sad to know that, Bernard does have self-control in a sense. But he always reports to Ford. But I still think there's certain things that he does that is acting in his own, self-interest. But he just has to talk to Ford about it, and he is... At the end of the day, always under Ford's control. He has to do what Ford wants.
Well, that's what I mean. Up until this point, we could see it that way, that he had his own free will. What? At a flick of a wrist, at a whisper of a command, he could do the unspeakable. So he just seemed like he had a shorter leash than any other host. So much so that he was allowed into corporate. And not only corporate, he was pretty much second in command on the programming side next to Ford.
Yeah, and Teresa ends up making a big mistake. She says that, his time is done. And Ford's like, I just wanted to tell my stories. And, she says the board won't stand for this, and he ends up laughing. And I think that really reflects back to what he acted like with Charlotte and Teresa pulling their little stunt. Is that he's almost thinking like she actually has no idea what's happening right now. He says that the board won't do anything because their arrangement is too valuable. And he says, the board does test me now and then. But he says, this time, the board sent me you. And he was saying that to Teresa, like, they sent me you. And he says, in order to restore things, the situation demands a blood sacrifice. Now, let me give you my thoughts, and then I want to hear what you think. These are what people are thinking. For one, they think that Hector was spying on Miss Hill and Teresa when they were talking. I don't think so. They're also thinking that Miss Hill is a host, and that's how Ford knows. And I don't think that either. What I think is that there is a conspiracy between Ford and the board. And this conspiracy is definitely a blood sacrifice. He said, this time they sent me you, almost like it's expected. And he talked to Teresa earlier and said that I've seen many of you over the years, and we've always figured out how to make it work. And I think every single time they make it work the same way. They kill them. And they go on to say, Delos as a corporation isn't interested in the hosts or the park. They're only interested in the code. And we've talked about their motives. They could be into recreating life and being able to transfer a conscious being into a fake body to almost create immortality. And I think you can't test that on real human subjects. So they have this underground deal where they allow Ford to have control of his park if they do this blood sacrifice. And what that is they send them a manager. They send Ford a manager, and Ford brings them down to his little den and kills them and recreates their corpse and tries to test this breakthrough. And what they're trying to explore in science is that body transfer. And Teresa was the next target, and I think they're going to end up rolling a whole new manager in. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so what I think about that, we're in the same lane, or at least we're going the same way. But I think the board wants human clones for a more nefarious reason.
Okay.
I think they want, like, Manchurian Candidate. I don't know if you know that movie, but they have complete control over the presidential candidate through subconscious hypnosis stuff, right? In this world, where they have complete control over as human as you can get robot, then they could replace key figures to either not destroy the world, but make the world in their motives or their image, right? So this technology would be very powerful. So it seems to me that Ford once in a while has to do this for the board, but he always maybe tries to fuck it up a bit and says, oh, I can't get the technology.
Okay.
Right? Like, I can't get it right. And whereas Arnold was getting to this point, and maybe this is why the reason is why he died. Because a difference in philosophy. I don't think Arnold was the bad guy, but I think he was looking for consciousness in these things so they could be their own species, in a sense. Whereas Ford knew what would happen if that happened. And now the board is asking him to do these things because they want it for more shadowy, nefarious reasons.
Yeah, for the reasons that he wants to keep private. And, it was Ford. I think Ford regrets bringing in the money men now.
Yeah.
Because, at the time, obviously, he wants the money. He wants to grow. But I think now he's trying to hide that. And he tells Teresa in their little conversation that they've always managed to make it work. Where Ford gets what he wants, exactly, and the board gets what they want. And I think this is the way to do it. The blood sacrifice. What the board gets is they get information and documentation on what they want. And they're not interested in the host. They're interested in just the code and the technology and what that technology could do. And what the technology could do is transferring one's consciousness into another body or immortality in that kind of sense. And they're doing hidden tests because it's illegal. So they bring in a manager and Ford kills them and then does the transfer and tests it. And that's how they're doing it.
Here's a question for you. Who's the oldest person we know in this show?
Ford?
Yeah. What if he's looking for the maze because he wants to upload himself? He's the oldest guy. He's probably the closest to death in this whole world right now, like that of the characters that we've seen. He knows the board is searching for all this shit. If he dies, he can't take the park with him in a way because it will be left open to anyone to go in there and figure it all out for the code that they want, for the things that they want. He needs to offload his consciousness into a new host so that he can continue being the control of this whole technology. Because if he dies, shit goes down the hill. All this technology is either lost or it gets in the wrong hands. And more than likely gets in the wrong hands.
Yeah, but see, you just assume that the maze is a place where you can transfer your body into a host.
I just think there's too many arrows pointing in that direction. They're calling Dolores, who's breaking code, wanting something better for herself, wanting something different from herself, wanting to escape this place. And then we have the Men in Black looking for the consciousness. And if the Men in Black is who we say is and is William, then he would be looking for it either to put himself into a host so that he could live forever within the game. And then Ford, with this minute sort of thinking of it, would want to be able to live on forever in control of this technology and in control of this place.
Yeah.
Right? So it seems like this, like Arnold figured out consciousness, and whatever he did it. And the way that he says is, I'm going to be the one to destroy this place. Meaning he did this as a sacrifice to destroy this place because he knew that technology was going to get into the hands of the wrong people. So he thought what he was going to do was going to create such a ripple effect that it would destroy this place and it wouldn't be viable. But Ford probably pulled it together and one last saving throw to save the whole place from collapse. And maybe William somehow or another pull something together with money and his influence at the company that he works with to save the place, as the Men in Black mentions that he saved this place.
Yeah, so I don't know, man. It'll be really interesting to see how this ends up. But then they continue the conversation, and Teresa almost kind of assumes or like knows that she's gonna get killed, and she asks, "Is this how Arnold died?" And, you know, did Bernard take him out into the woods? And then Ford goes on to say, "I don't think Bernard was around during those times. Were you, Bernard?" And he like asks him almost like he doesn't know. Yeah. Do you think he knows? I don't even know.
No, because if what I'm thinking is happening is Bernard is Arnold now, or in the image of Arnold. So maybe Ford didn't know about him at this time that he existed.
Yeah, and maybe, you know, if Arnold wanted to pursue this maze and maybe go in the maze and meet Dolores there, I'm not sure. Because then it's like because Dolores killed Arnold. So it's like he would have had to be there. So it's almost like he created a host in his stead, which is himself. So it's like maybe Ford is questioning when that actually was.
Yeah. Or he's confusing timelines because he's like, oh yeah, were you Bernard or were you Ford back then?
Yeah, exactly. And then Teresa tries to get a call or like call somebody for help. And then, you know, Ford just gives her like the creepiest look ever. Like, yeah, like he's fuck, dude. So scary. It gives me the chills. Yeah, and then awesome. Bernard ends up just beating the living shit out of Teresa. Just like a smack to the head and a punch in the face. Done.
Like some serious gangster punches.
I know, and then he just gets his tie back on and like all nice. That was very creepy. They shot that brilliantly. Really kept the tension.
Yeah.
But I just have a couple questions for you. What do you think of Bernard now? Is he like just as likable now that he's a host?
No, he's like a Greek tragedy, man. Because I know he's gonna be feeling that ripple effect from what he did, because I don't think he's had to do that ever before. And he's really gonna feel it, and he's gonna question his reality, and he's gonna break and no matter what Ford says or does to patch him, this is something that's gonna shine through and corrupt his character into being like a freedom fighter.
Yeah, I agree. Things. And I think it was really important for the show to have this switch, to have a character that is a human and then convert him into a host, or like he was a host all along, because you want the audience to sympathize for this person, and then for them to automatically be a host shows that these hosts aren't so far off from what humans are. It was good for the audience to see, because now you can look at Dolores and you can look at Maeve and all these different hosts and realize, oh, these things are more than just robots, you know? These are truly humans, and you really get to see that through Bernard, and it was good that they did that. The reason why I'm sad that he's a host is because I can't even explain why. It's just upsetting.
Well, yeah, it's totally sad. It's sad that he was programmed to think that he had a wife and kid. It's sad that he's like a puppet. It's sad that he has no humanity. It was like all a lie.
Yeah. But it's one of those things that can be fixed, I think, if they just remove that controlling aspect of their mind. But it's like, would these hosts even want to be a part of the real world?
Well, it's like Bernard's the missing link here. He thinks that he was a part of the real world. So he's going to have a real hard time reconciling that he's not a part of the real world. And we even kind of see it, like he's like, I can't be one of these things. Like, I'm programmed to think that I'm not one of these things.
Yeah, exactly. And then another question. Everybody now is like thinking everyone's a host now. So what's your thoughts about that? Do you think everyone is actually a host?
No, not yet.
Or like there are a lot more people that could be hosts that we don't know about?
Yes, that I agree with. I agree with there's a lot more people that are hosts that we have yet to see. And this is where I grouped Bernard in. Like, to me, this is like a season 2 finale reveal that they give us episode 7, season 1. Like, this is a big reveal. This was a big episode.
I know, it's making me nervous because this whole season feels so self-contained. Like, where the hell do you go from here?
I know.
Like, after episode 10, like, I feel like it's done. Like, I don't even know where you could possibly go from that.
Like, how big of a deal to people that aren't seeing the William Men in Black connection? How big of a reaction would that be once that finally comes to fruition? Right?
I don't know.
For us, it's just vindication, right? When and if it happens. But like that would be a pretty big reveal. But for them to pull this and put it in front of everything else just seems like, whoa. Like, I can't believe that they did this.
Yeah, but this actually doesn't change how I feel about everyone being a host. I think that the majority of humans are most likely human.
Yeah.
Because with Bernard, you had them putting in hints throughout the show. Everything can be explained and proven why Bernard is a host based on everything, all the actions that he's undertaken throughout the series. This show is extremely intelligent, and they don't just throw stuff at you for the sake of shock value. It's built up over countless actions done by these characters to prove that it's actually true.
Oh, no, it's cold and calculated, man.
Yeah, so the majority of these characters are actually human. But, I'm going to have to see, some hints throughout the show to prove some characters are hosts, because they always lay that groundwork. And now that Ford is recreating people that were alive and now recreating them to become hosts, possibly, it could change the game a bit, but, I still think we should take things at face value. And if the information is provided, then we run with it.
Yeah, I don't think everyone's a host. Definitely not. But I think there is going to be a lot more people that are.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to add?
No, not for this. Excellent episode. Amazing on all levels. And still, how awesome is it that we're surprised by this at episode 7?
Oh, it's fantastic. And
so original,
that does
so awesome.
Yeah, it's just so well done. I'm really loving the show. I think this could be one of my favorite shows ever. Like, it's tied for me with Thrones.
Yeah, it's good.
But
it's out of nowhere too, right?
Yeah, exactly. But that does it, everybody, for our Westworld episode 7 analysis video. Yeah, I'm really excited for the next episode. I guess I'll see you guys later.
Take care.